one thing we've always certainly advocated for and here is more big corporations and certainly bosses. In this case, we've got the ASDA boss, who was actually a prominent Remainer. Has come out and said, "Look, ASDA is having big problems because of Brexit. That's good. When we hear that, that only reinforces what we have been saying for years about Brexit, that it was always going to cause problems. It was always going to create these trade barriers, which would make it harder for businesses to, trade with our biggest, trading partner. That's the EU. That's never going to change because of trade gravity, because say it with me, we've been over this before, although it's been a while, so you might have forgotten. But countries always trade with their closest neighbors first. Who is our closest neighbor? It's the EU. That isn't going to change at all. Doesn't matter that we do these trade deals with, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. Even if somehow miraculously we end up joining the TCP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that ain't going to change. We ain't suddenly going to start seeing massive trade volumes from Japan, Australia, New Zealand, or Indonesia. That's not going to happen, because those countries are halfway around the world. And guess what? Why are they signing the TTP? Because they trade with each other regularly, far more than certainly we do. So it's really good, to be honest, to see that more and more businesses are slowly, but at least they're starting to wake up to realize, hey, we need to, tell politicians, you need to sort this out. And even here, the ASDA boss, talks about what Keir Starmer said about some of this stuff as well. So, hey, like I say, we'll get into those comments when we get to them. But yeah, again, we've talked about this. My sort of feelings on this, but again, I'll probably end up going over them again on those. But again, again, before we get into this, please do remember to hit the subscribe button if you are new to the channel, or if you haven't done so before. Again, there's a like and share button that helps out the channel massively. Ring the bell as well so you get notifications on when we go live or when we drop a new video. There's the YouTube Patreon option, the Pony Club, there's the Patreon itself, there's the YouTube thank you button, there's the buy me a coffee link where you can again buy me a coffee. So all that's all down below, guys. Like I say, go check it out. And I was always say, guys, thank you very much for helping to support the channel. It means absolutely massive. I'm always blown away by the support you guys show. So as always, we go over to the Independent, the title of UK suffering from catastrophic impact of Brexit, says ASDA boss. Britain is suffering from the catastrophic impact of Brexit and should consider a closer trading relationship with the EU, according to the ASDA chair. Tory peer, Lord Stuart Rose. And again, notice it's a Tory peer. I wouldn't be surprised if more and more of these people start coming out to be Tory peers, because most big British sort of CEOs or big, British, interests tend to be in the Tory party. So, and remember, the whole reason we ended up joining sort of the beginnings was, as it was put to the time, Heath had been hearing the screeches of the golf carts whenever he was on the golf court, the golf course. He'd hear the screeching of the brakes of these golf carts, and these big CEOs of these companies run forward to him and said, "We must join in the European trade bloc. We've got to join it for the sake of my company and the future of British industry. We've got to join it." Well, guess what? We're seeing this exactly happen again, except it's happening in the front pages, which in the pages of newspapers, which is good. But these conversations need to be started having, I think, not just outside of sort of political parties, but inside political parties as well. I think those pro-Europeans in the Tory party should not be afraid to now actually start speaking up about the consequences of Brexit and that Brexit was just a bad idea. As you've got here, you've got a Tory peer standing up and saying, yeah, Brexit was a bad idea. But anyway, let's get on with it. So Tory peer Lord Stuart Rose said that the trade between the UK and his neighbouring bloc was not flowing smoothly, as he outlined why all sides should compromise to achieve closer ties. And that is it. It is about compromise. When we were in the EU, it wasn't about domination. It was about compromise. That is how modern trade deals work. Compromise, giving up a bit of sovereignty for, again, as we saw when we were in the EU, for big gains in return. So when asked about the impact of Brexit has had on his business, Lord Rose, a prominent Remain campaigner, told LBC it's been catastrophic. The supermarket chief said that working out the economic consequences of the UK's exit had been clouded by the COVID crisis, the war in Ukraine, and the global shutdown. And he's right. The best thing for the Brexiteers was COVID, because it has covered up so much of their Brexit messes that they've created. So much. And even as we've always said, the further we get away from this, the further we get away from COVID, the more you can actually see the impacts of sort of what Brexit did. But of course, you now have a lot of these Brexiteers come out saying, oh no, that's just the continuing effects of COVID. Or, oh no, that's just the war in Ukraine. Oh no, that's just the global slowdown. Again, they're coming up with so many excuses to try and excuse their precious project from why it's failing. But anyway, he continues. This is going to be fuel for economists to argue about for the next 40 to 50 years about what impact it had, he said. We'll never know, he added. But trust me, I can smell it. We've suffered. We are the only economy, I think, in the G7, possibly in the G20, who has actually not yet recovered to pre-COVID levels. That tells you something. And he's right. I think it certainly is definitely the G7. I can't say if it's the G20 or not. It might very well be the case as well in the G20. But yeah, he's right. We haven't recovered to these pre-COVID levels. And it does look like that is certainly continuing on that. So Lord Rose said that there was very little chance of the UK returning to the EU, but he suggested that he welcomed the calls from the Labour Party about a closer trading relationship with Europe. Labour leader Keir Starmer has ruled out the idea of rejoining the EU single market, but he wants a new veterinary agreement to tear down barriers for the agri-food product exporters. I noticed this week the Labour Party said we won't go back into the EU single market, but we would like to have a closer trading relationship with Europe, said Lord Rose. Well, I don't care what we call it. We can call it the Mickey Mouse Agreement as far as I'm concerned. What we need to do is we need to have a stronger trading relationship, he added. And he's right. He's right. These moves by the Labour Party saying, well, we might not rejoin the single market, but we're going to seek, closer alignment. We're going to do these agri-food deals so we can get these veterinary agreements in place. That will help businesses massively. And as I've always said, going this direction eventually just becomes, well, if we're that closely aligned or we're aligning with them that closely, then why not just rejoin the single market and customs union? That is always has been the direction of travel that we've been going in since 2016. And certainly even more now officially since 2020, when obviously the proper Brexit happens. But now we're back to it. So the Tory peer called on Rishi Sunak's government to, quote, sort out some of the nonsense like we've got in the Northern Ireland Protocol, so that our two biggest trading partners can actually trade better together. At the moment, it's not flowing smoothly. He added, there appears to be a willingness on all sides to come together to some sort of compromise, and it's all about compromise. So Keir said last week he would set out plans to, quote, make Brexit work in more detail soon. after his frontbencher, Lisa Nadley, said that the party would look to align the UK with EU laws in more areas than just the veterinary standards and security. So again, seeking alignment. That's good, because the more alignment you have, the less argument there then becomes to, well, let's just rejoin the single market customs union. If we're so aligned, why are we out of it? And the arguments just become more stronger. So I know this doesn't upset a lot of people that isn't sort of the case for rejoining, but to be honest, pursuing closer alignment makes sense, because the second you start to do that, you can then go, well, why aren't we in the single market customs union? If we are so aligned, why aren't we in these, this grouping? It doesn't make sense to be out of it. So even though I agree with a lot of people, it is upsetting not to see that, being in that, Labour pursuing that grouping. It's good that they're at least acknowledging that we are going to have a closer alignment. And that is good. That will certainly ease the passage of us going back into the EU a heck of a lot more smoothly. This is why the retained EU law bill that hopefully, fingers crossed, is going to crash and burn today. That was the plan of the EU retained law bill, to try and smash as many bridges as they can, so that Labour just finds it more and more difficult to try and make any return to the EU or the customs union or the single market as hard as possible. Meanwhile, there was no breakthrough on the post-Brexit row over the Northern Ireland Protocol, following the talks between Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and his European counterpart Markus Sovac. Now, I have said, and I did say, we might expect a week of these talks about the Northern Ireland Protocol. There has not been a breakthrough as a lot of people suspected there would be, but what has happened is that they've gone and said, okay, let's have more talks. Let's have more negotiations. That is a good sign. Normally, what would happen, if certainly Rishi Sunak was a lot more hardcore Brexiteer, Sunak would just come out swinging, certainly like Boris Johnson did, and say, look, these negotiations are going nowhere. So we're going to plow on, continue with the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, and make sure we can just do these changes ourselves. And of course, that would lead to a whole series of messes in itself. Luckily, Sunak does not seem to be going that way. He certainly seems to be a lot more pragmatic about getting this deal done, which is good. But of course, is, as we've said before, what are the Brexiteers' response to this going to be, and certainly what are potentially going to be the DUP's response to this. So Mr. Cleverly and Mr. Sovac said that they would continue to search for potential solutions in a constructive and collaborative spirit after they discussed a range of existing challenges in a virtual meeting. That is good. That is an incredibly different change of language to what we are normally used to be seeing in these conversations. So that is at least a positive step forward. The Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said that recent signs of progress on the protocol are promising. Rishi Sunak must press on and stand up to the ERG hardliners before this window of opportunity closes. So, and yeah, like I say, we've talked about it before, about Starmer saying, look, we're going to give you cover. If you need anything to sort of make sure that the protocol works, we are more than happy to give you this, because obviously sorting out the Northern Ireland Protocol is going to be in the national interest. So if you come up with sensible proposals to make sure that the protocol works, and you need that political cover in order to make the protocol work, then we will back you on that, and that will be good. That, to be honest, will be a massive step, certainly in the right direction in these types of things. And as we've said before, we're going to end up back in the EU. It's just a matter of time. And certainly, as the Telegraph, one of the Brexiteers, I think a Brexiteer supporter, decried recently. We'll be going over that in soon, actually. Oh my God, we're going to enter the EU we're going to be back in the EU before anyone, sooner than anyone even realizes. And yes, because Brexit was always a failure. It was pretty much a guaranteed, baked-in failure. It had no policy. It had no idea beyond, you do Brexit. Okay, then what? What about all these problems that your solution is meant to be solving? What about all those? They don't just magically disappear just because you've done Brexit. That's not how it works. And this is why we are seeing even again today, David Davis saying, pretty much, yeah, this isn't why I voted for Brexit, for this nonsense EU, retained law bill. I want to give Parliament a greater say over this. Which again, I'll give Davis now. At least he is sticking to his guns over wanting more parliamentary sovereignty. At least we can sort of believe him in that, because he is actually standing up for something he has, campaigned for during Brexit. I want more, parliamentary sovereignty. And of course, this EU retained law bill takes away parliamentary sovereignty. At least we can say is his principles in and around that are very much true. It's not like the other Brexiteers who don't really seem to believe in parliamentary sovereignty, at least areas where they don't want parliamentary sovereignty. But hey, there you go. So, as always, like I say, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.